A son watches his father drown. A German shepherd dives in to save him. What happens next exposes dark family secrets and creates an unexpected legacy of healing. Subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. The morning sun glinted off Lake Champlain's surface, casting diamond-like reflections across the water. It was early May in Vermont, the air crisp with spring's tentative warmth, trees beginning their annual transformation from skeletal silhouettes to lush green sentinels. Charles Sullivan, once a titan of East Coast real estate development, sat frail and disoriented in the stern of his custom-built mahogany Chris-Craft, his weathered hands trembling slightly as they rested on his lap. "Beautiful day for a ride, isn't it, Dad?" Brandon Sullivan's voice carried a practiced warmth that never quite reached his steel-gray eyes. Tall and impeccably dressed in a navy blazer despite the casual setting, Brandon had his father's strong jaw and commanding presence, but none of the genuine charm that had made the elder Sullivan beloved in business circles decades ago. Charles nodded absently, his once sharp blue eyes clouded with confusion. Yes. Reminds me of that summer in Newport with your mother." His voice drifted off as his mind slipped into another time. Brandon's jaw tightened. "Mom's been gone 20 years, Dad. It's just us now." He checked his Rolex impatiently. At 42, he was tired of waiting for his inheritance, tired of managing his father's increasingly erratic behavior, tired of pretending to care. Half a mile away, along the densely wooded shoreline trail, Maggie Claire Reynolds hiked briskly, her German shepherd, Atlas, trotting obediently beside her. At 45, Claire, as everyone called her, carried herself with the confidence of someone who had rebuilt her life from scratch. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, laugh lines framing her green eyes that missed nothing. After 15 soul-crushing years in corporate marketing in Boston, she'd walked away from a six-figure salary to start Northwoods Guide Dogs, training service animals for people with disabilities. "What do you think, Atlas?" Another mile before lunch. Claire smiled at her star pupil, an exceptionally intelligent 2-year-old shepherd with soulful brown eyes and uncanny intuition. Atlas's ears perked up suddenly, his attention drawn to the lake. Back on the boat, Brandon had maneuvered them to the center of the lake, far from shore, far from witnesses. He cut the engine, the sudden silence hanging heavy between father and son. "I spoke with Dr. Harrison yesterday," Brandon said casually, reaching into the cooler for a bottle of water. "Your condition is progressing faster than expected." Charles frowned, momentary clarity sharpening his gaze. "I may be confused sometimes, Brandon, but I'm not a fool. I know what you've been doing with the company funds." Brandon froze, bottle halfway to his lips. "You don't know what you're talking about. The medication is making you paranoid. Is that why you took my phone? Why I suddenly can't reach my attorney?" Charles's voice strengthened with indignation. "I started that company with nothing but a loan and your mother's faith in me. I won't let you destroy it with your gambling and shortcuts." Brandon's facade cracked, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "You have no proof of anything. And even if you did, who would believe you?" The great Charles Sullivan, now confusing his own son with his business rivals from 30 years ago. "I may be dying, son, but I'm not dead yet." Charles reached into his jacket pocket. "And I've made some changes you won't like." What happened next occurred in terrible slow motion. Brandon lunged across the boat, knocking his father backward. Charles's head hit the gunwale with a sickening crack. Before Brandon could react, the elderly man slid overboard into the cold, deep waters of Lake Champlain. Brandon stood frozen, watching his father's body sink beneath the surface. He hadn't meant for this to happen, or had he? Panic and opportunity warred within him as seconds ticked by. He could dive in after his father, or he could finally be free. Atlas's bark echoed across the water, startling Brandon from his trance. On shore, Claire watched in horror as the magnificent German shepherd broke from her side, plunging into the lake with powerful strokes, racing toward what looked like a body in the water. "Atlas, come back," Claire shouted, already kicking off her hiking boots. But the dog was beyond commands now, driven by instinct and purpose. Claire grabbed her phone, dialing 911 as she ran along the shoreline, keeping her eyes fixed on her dog swimming toward a drama whose first act was just beginning to unfold. Atlas cut through the water with powerful, determined strokes, his training as a rescue dog kicking in instinctively. Claire sprinted along the rocky shoreline, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched her dog reach the elderly man's limp form. With remarkable precision, Atlas positioned himself beneath Charles's shoulder, keeping the man's face above water. "Help is coming," Claire shouted toward the boat, where Brandon stood motionless, his face a mask of shock. Or was it calculation? Something about his stillness sent a chill through Claire that had nothing to do with the spring breeze off the lake. Brandon finally seemed to snap out of his trance. "My father, he fell. He has episodes, his illness." His voice carried across the water, practiced concern replacing the momentary flash of cold deliberation Claire thought she'd glimpsed. Without hesitation, Claire dove into the frigid lake, swimming with powerful strokes honed during years of competitive swimming in college. The cold water seized her lungs, but adrenaline propelled her forward until she reached Atlas and the unconscious man he kept afloat. "Good boy, Atlas," she gasped, taking over support of Charles's head while the dog continued to buoy his body. "Let's get him to shore." By the time they reached the rocky beach, Brandon had maneuvered the boat to the nearest dock and was running toward them, phone ostensibly pressed to his ear. "Ambulance is on the way," he called, his designer shoes slipping on the wet stones. Claire laid Charles gently on his side, checking his pulse, weak but present. His skin was alarmingly pale, lips tinged blue, but he was breathing. Atlas stood vigilant, his wet fur bristling as Brandon approached, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Atlas, easy," Claire commanded, though something in her trusted companion's reaction gave her pause. Animals often sense things humans missed. Brandon knelt beside his father, his expensive trousers soaking up lake water and mud. "Dad, can you hear me?" The performance was flawless, concerned son, voice trembling with emotion, but his eyes remained calculating, assessing. "How long was he in the water?" Claire asked, removing her light jacket to cover the elderly man. "Just a minute or two," Brandon replied too quickly. He stood up suddenly, lost his balance. It happened so fast. Atlas's growl deepened as Brandon reached toward Charles. "Your dog seems aggressive," Brandon noted coldly, withdrawing his hand. Claire met his gaze directly. "He's protective, not aggressive. There's a difference." Something passed between them then, an unspoken challenge, recognition of adversaries. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Charles stirred slightly, water trickling from the corner of his mouth as he coughed weakly. "Sir, can you hear me?" Claire leaned close, her voice gentle but firm. "You're safe now. Help is coming." Charles's eyes fluttered open, clouded with confusion and fear. His gaze locked with Claire's, a moment of startling clarity amid the disorientation. He pushed. He whispered, the words barely audible before his eyes rolled back, and he fell unconscious again. Brandon hadn't heard, busy waving down the paramedics now bumping along the lakeside trail in their all-terrain vehicle. But Claire had heard, and Atlas, still standing guard, seemed to understand the gravity of those whispered words, his intelligent eyes fixed on Brandon with unwavering suspicion. The paramedics worked quickly, assessing Charles's condition, attaching monitors, and preparing him for transport. "BP's dropping," one said urgently. "Possible hypothermia, head trauma, and there's something else going on here. We need to move now." "I'm coming with you," Brandon insisted, already pulling out his wallet. "I'm his son, Brandon Sullivan. Whatever he needs, best specialists, private rooms, just name it." The lead paramedic nodded briskly. "We're taking him to Champlain Medical Center in Burlington. It's the nearest trauma facility." "I found him," Claire interjected, Atlas still at her side, both dripping lake water. "My dog pulled him from the lake." "I'm coming too." Brandon's face hardened momentarily before softening into a practiced smile. "I appreciate your help, truly, but this is a family matter now. I'll make sure you're properly thanked for your heroism." "I don't want thanks," Claire replied evenly. "I want to make sure he's okay." The tension between them was palpable as Charles was loaded into the ambulance. Brandon climbed in beside his father, shooting Claire a final dismissive glance before the doors closed. As the ambulance pulled away, Claire stood shivering in her wet clothes, one hand resting on Atlas's damp fur. "Something's not right, boy," she murmured. Atlas whined in agreement, his eyes still fixed on the departing vehicle. Claire hadn't spent years reading canine behavior without learning to trust her own instincts too. The man had whispered he pushed, not I fell. And Brandon Sullivan's performance, while polished, couldn't hide the calculated coldness she'd witnessed in those first crucial moments. Come on, Atlas, she said, gathering her discarded hiking boots. We're going to Burlington. Neither Claire nor Atlas realized then how their impulsive rescue would entangle them in a web of family secrets, betrayal, and unexpected redemption, or how the ripples from this day would eventually reshape all their lives. Champlain Medical Center bustled with the controlled chaos typical of a regional trauma facility. Claire, now in dry clothes retrieved from her truck, sat in the waiting room with Atlas at her feet. Despite not being a service dog officially on duty, she'd managed to bring him in, partly through her professional credentials as a trainer and partly through the sympathetic understanding of the ER nurse who'd recognized Atlas as the hero dog from the lake. Claire scrolled through her phone, researching Charles Sullivan. What she found was impressive. Founder of Sullivan Properties, responsible for revitalizing waterfronts from Portland to Providence, known for incorporating green spaces and affordable housing components when neither was fashionable. There were numerous articles about his philanthropy, his innovative designs, his commitment to community-centered development. And there was Brandon, his only son, gradually taking control of the company over the past 5 years as his father's public appearances became rarer. The corporate headshot showed a handsome man with his father's distinguished features, but none of the warmth that radiated from the elder Sullivan's photos. "Excuse me," a deep voice interrupted her research. Claire looked up to see a tall black man in his 50s, wearing a white coat with Dr. Isaiah Raymond, Neurology, embroidered on the pocket. His kind eyes were offset by the gravity of his expression. "You're the woman who rescued Mr. Sullivan?" Claire stood, extending her hand. "Claire Reynolds. And this is Atlas, who actually did the rescuing. How is Mr. Sullivan?" Dr. Raymond's handshake was firm, his gaze appraising. "Stable, but his condition is complicated. The near drowning is actually the least of our concerns." He glanced around the waiting room. "Would you mind stepping somewhere more private?" Claire followed him to a small consultation room, Atlas padding silently beside her. Once the door closed, Dr. Raymond's professional demeanor softened slightly. "I understand you're not family, but I've treated Charles Sullivan for nearly a year now. He has a rare form of frontotemporal dementia that affects his memory and sometimes his ability to recognize people." He hesitated. "His son has painted you as some sort of opportunist looking for publicity or reward money. Given what I know of Brandon Sullivan, that makes me think the opposite might be true." Claire bristled. "I didn't even know who they were until after the ambulance left. Atlas and I were hiking when we saw someone drowning. End of story." "But not quite," Dr. Raymond countered gently. "You said they. Did you witness the incident?" Atlas shifted restlessly as Claire considered her words carefully. "I saw a man go overboard. I saw another man, his son, apparently, standing in the boat, watching. Not jumping in, not throwing a life preserver. Just watching." She met the doctor's eyes directly, and when Mr. Sullivan briefly regained consciousness on shore, he whispered he pushed. Dr. Raymond's expression darkened. "That aligns with concerns I've had for some time. Charles has lucid periods where he's expressed fear of his son, then confused periods where he seems to forget those concerns entirely. Brandon has been pushing to have him declared incompetent to manage his affairs. Can he do that? He's been trying. I've resisted signing off on it because Charles's condition is episodic. He has good days and bad days." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock. The door opened to reveal a petite woman in scrubs, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes bright with intelligence. "Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Raymond, but Mr. Sullivan is asking for the woman with the shepherd." She smiled at Claire and Atlas. "I'm Anna Calderon, his primary nurse. I grew up in the same fishing village as Mr. Sullivan, before he was Mr. Sullivan, the big developer. Back then, he was just Charlie, the boat builder's son with big dreams." "He's conscious?" Claire asked, surprised. Anna nodded. "And remarkably lucid. We see this sometimes. A traumatic event can temporarily clear the fog. It won't last, but..." She glanced at Dr. Raymond. "His son stepped out to make calls. If you want to speak with Charles privately, now's the time." Dr. Raymond hesitated only briefly. "Let's go. I want to hear what he has to say." Charles Sullivan's private room was a corner suite with views of the Green Mountains. The man himself looked shockingly vulnerable in the hospital bed, monitors beeping softly, an oxygen cannula beneath his nose. But his eyes, a startling blue despite his advanced age, were clear and focused as they entered. "There you are," he said, his voice stronger than Claire expected. "You and your magnificent dog. I owe you my life." Claire approached the bed, Atlas following respectfully. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Claire Reynolds. This is Atlas." Charles reached a trembling hand toward the shepherd, who gently nuzzled his palm. "Good boy," he whispered. "You knew, didn't you? Animals always know." "Know what, Mr. Sullivan?" Dr. Raymond asked quietly. Charles's eyes darted to the door, sudden fear clouding their clarity. "Brandon will be back soon. I don't have much time when I'm myself." His fingers clutched at the bedsheet. "My son tried to kill me today. It wasn't the first attempt, just the most direct." Anna gasped softly, but Dr. Raymond remained composed. "Charles, are you certain? Your condition sometimes causes confusion. I'm not confused now." Charles interrupted with surprising force. "I've suspected for months. Small things, missing medications, canceled appointments with my lawyer, documents I apparently signed but don't remember." His gaze locked with Claire's. "He thought nobody was watching today, but you were. And your dog." His voice broke. "Please, help me." The door swung open, and Brandon Sullivan entered, his practiced smile freezing as he took in the tableau before him. His eyes narrowed at Claire, then swept to Dr. Raymond and Anna. "Well," he said, voice dripping with false charm, "this is quite the welcome committee. I'm afraid my father needs rest, not an audience." His tone hardened, especially not from strangers trying to ingratiate themselves with a vulnerable old man. The battle lines were drawn. In that moment, Claire knew she was committed, not just to uncovering the truth, but to protecting the dignified man whose life Atlas had saved. Whatever it might cost her, she couldn't walk away. The spring rain pelted against the windows of Claire's modest farmhouse on the outskirts of Burlington. 3 days had passed since the lake incident, and she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by printouts of articles about the Sullivan family. Atlas curled at her feet. The German shepherd's ears perked up moments before the doorbell rang. Who could that be at this hour? Claire muttered, glancing at the clock. 9:37 p.m. She approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. Dr. Isaiah Raymond stood on her porch, rain dripping from his jacket. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced," he said when she opened the door, "but I didn't want to discuss this over the phone." Claire ushered him in. Atlas approached the doctor, sniffing him thoroughly before giving an approving tail wag. "He remembers you," Claire said, taking Dr. Raymond's wet coat. "Coffee, please." He followed her to the kitchen, his expression grave. "Brandon Sullivan is moving his father to a private facility in Arizona tomorrow. Once Charles leaves Vermont, I lose any medical oversight." Claire set down the coffee pot with more force than necessary. "Can he do that? Just whisk him away?" "Legally, yes. Brandon has medical power of attorney, something Charles apparently signed last year, though I have doubts about his capacity to understand what he was signing at that time." Dr. Raymond accepted the steaming mug with a nod of thanks. "I've filed concerns with the hospital ethics committee, but these things take time we don't have." "What about adult protective services? If we suspect elder abuse?" Brandon has already spun a narrative painting his father as confused and you as an opportunist looking for a payout. He suggested I'm overstepping because I've become emotionally attached to my patient. His mouth twisted bitterly. The man knows how to work the system. Claire paced the small kitchen, Atlas watching her intently. "There must be something we can do." "Actually," Dr. Raymond said carefully, "there is. That's why I'm here." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small flash drive. "Charles gave me this the day after the incident, during a period of lucidity. He said if anything happened to him, I should share it with the dog woman." Claire took the flash drive, turning it over in her palm. "What's on it?" "I don't know. He made me promise not to look, said it would protect me if Brandon started making accusations. But he was adamant you should have it." Before Claire could respond, headlights swept across her living room windows. A sleek black Audi pulled into her driveway. "Expecting someone else?" Dr. Raymond asked, tension evident in his voice. "No." Claire moved to the window, Atlas immediately at her side, a low growl building in his throat. "It's Brandon Sullivan." Dr. Raymond quickly pocketed the flash drive again. "Let me handle this. He doesn't know we've connected." Brandon approached the door with the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting his way. His tailored overcoat barely showed traces of the rain, as if even the elements dared not dishevel him. His eyebrows rose in mock surprise when Dr. Raymond opened the door. "Well, this is unexpected," Brandon said smoothly. "Doctor-patient confidentiality certainly has flexible boundaries in Vermont, doesn't it?" "Mr. Sullivan," Dr. Raymond replied evenly. "I was just leaving after discussing Miss Reynolds' heroic actions with her dog. Professional courtesy between first responders." Brandon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How fortuitous that I caught you both together, then." He turned to Claire, who stood with arms crossed, Atlas rigid at her side. "May I come in? What I have to say concerns both of you." Claire hesitated, then stepped back, allowing Brandon entry but maintaining distance. Atlas remained vigilant, his eyes never leaving the visitor. "Your dog seems to have an issue with me," Brandon observed coldly. "Atlas is an excellent judge of character," Claire replied, not bothering to soften her tone. Brandon chuckled without humor. "Direct. I appreciate that." He surveyed the modest home with barely concealed disdain. "Let me be equally direct. My father is a very wealthy man suffering from a degenerative neurological condition that causes paranoia, confusion, and fabricated memories." "I'm well aware of his diagnosis," Dr. Raymond interjected. "I've been his neurologist for nearly a year." "Then you should understand my concern when I discover he's making wild accusations about his only son, the son who has managed his care and his business affairs while he deteriorates." Brandon's voice hardened. "I'm relocating my father to a specialized facility better equipped for his needs. This is happening tomorrow. And you came all this way in the rain to tell us this?" Claire asked, suspicion evident. "I came to make things clear." Brandon reached into his inner pocket and withdrew an envelope, which he placed on Claire's kitchen table. "My father believes you saved his life. Whether that's true or a confused man's interpretation doesn't matter. The Sullivan family takes care of its debts." Claire didn't touch the envelope. "I don't want your money. $50,000 says otherwise." Brandon's smile was predatory. "Consider it thanks for your quick action and—" He paused meaningfully. "Your discretion moving forward." The implication hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. "Are you trying to buy my silence, Mr. Sullivan?" Claire's voice was steady despite her rising anger. "I'm compensating you generously for an unfortunate incident while ensuring my father's confused statements don't become fodder for small-town gossip." Brandon straightened his already impeccable cuffs. "The alternative is considerably less pleasant for everyone. My family has resources and connections you cannot begin to imagine." Dr. Raymond stepped forward. "That sounds remarkably like a threat." "Merely a statement of fact," Brandon replied coolly. "My father needs specialized care, not amateur detectives playing at heroism. The most compassionate thing for everyone is to accept reality and move on." He nodded toward the envelope. "Tax-free cash. No questions asked." Claire locked eyes with Brandon, her voice low and measured. "Get out of my house." Something dangerous flashed in Brandon's eyes before he regained his composure. "I'll leave the envelope. When you reconsider, and you will, the offer expires at noon tomorrow." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Dr. Raymond? The hospital board might be interested to learn about your after-hours house calls to attractive younger women." After Brandon left, Claire and Dr. Raymond stood in stunned silence, the envelope on the table between them like a ticking bomb. "He's terrified," Claire finally said. "Whatever's on that flash drive must be damning. And we're running out of time to use it," Dr. Raymond replied grimly. "By this time tomorrow, Charles Sullivan will be beyond our reach." Dawn broke over Burlington, painting Lake Champlain in strokes of amber and gold. Claire hadn't slept, her laptop screen illuminating her tired face as she examined the contents of Charles Sullivan's flash drive. Atlas dozed nearby, occasionally raising his head as if sensing her emotional turmoil. "This is bigger than we thought," she murmured, scrolling through financial records, emails, and personal journal entries meticulously organized by date. Charles Sullivan, despite his declining health, had been documenting his suspicions about his son for over a year. The doorbell rang at precisely 7 a.m. Claire closed her laptop and moved to answer it, not surprised to find Anna Calderon on her doorstep, still in her hospital scrubs after the night shift. "He's being discharged at 10 a.m., Anna said without preamble, accepting the coffee Claire offered. Brandon's arranged a private medical transport to the airport. They're flying directly to Arizona. We need to delay them, Claire replied, leading Anna to the kitchen where Dr. Raymond was already seated, having spent the night reviewing medical options. The flash drive contains evidence of financial fraud on a massive scale. Brandon has been systematically looting his father's company and personal accounts. Dr. Raymond rubbed his bloodshot eyes. Financial crimes take time to investigate. We need something immediate to prevent Charles from being taken across state lines. Anna set down her mug with decisive force. I might have something. Last night, I helped Charles to the bathroom. When Brandon stepped out to take a call, Charles grabbed my hand and whispered that Brandon has been tampering with his medication. He begged me to check the pill bottles Brandon brings from home. Did you? Claire asked, leaning forward. I took samples from 3 different bottles, Anna confirmed, reaching into her pocket. She produced a small plastic bag containing several pills. These are supposedly his memory stabilizers, but they look different from his hospital meds. Dr. Raymond took the bag, examining the pills closely. These need to be analyzed immediately. If Brandon has been giving Charles the wrong medication deliberately, his voice trailed off, the implications clear. That's attempted murder, Claire finished. We need to get these to a lab now. I know someone at the University Research Center who owes me a favor, Dr. Raymond said, already reaching for his phone. But even with expedited testing, results could take hours. We don't have hours, Anna reminded them, her normally calm demeanor giving way to urgency. And we need more than just suspicions of medication tampering. Brandon could claim it was an innocent mix-up. Claire opened her laptop again, turning it so they could see the screen. What about this? Charles documented everything. Dates, times, symptoms that appeared only after Brandon personally administered his medication. He even managed to keep a few pills he suspected were substitutions. Dr. Raymond scanned the meticulous notes, his expression darkening. This is damning, but without the actual pills Charles saved for comparison. They might be in his room at the estate, Anna suggested. I could try to. Too dangerous, Claire interrupted. Brandon would recognize you instantly. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen, broken only by Atlas's sudden alertness. The German shepherd stood, head cocked toward the window, a low whine escaping him. Claire moved to look outside. It's Nurse Gina from the hospital, she said, recognizing the young woman hurrying up her walkway. She opened the door before Gina could knock. Thank God you're all here, Gina gasped, clearly having rushed over. Mr. Sullivan is asking for Claire and Atlas. He's agitated, saying he won't leave until he sees the dog woman. Brandon is furious, threatening to have security remove me for even delivering the message. Dr. Raymond was already on his feet. This gives us an opening. If Charles is refusing transport without seeing Claire first, it buys us time. But Brandon will never allow it, Anna objected. He might not have a choice, Claire replied, an idea forming. If Charles is lucid enough to make his wishes known and creates enough of a scene. Exactly, Dr. Raymond agreed. As his physician, I can document that forcing him to leave against his expressed wishes when he's demonstrating clear decision-making capacity could constitute patient endangerment. Claire knelt beside Atlas, running her hands through his thick fur. What do you say, boy? Ready to visit your new friend? The hospital corridor buzzed with tension when they arrived 20 minutes later. Claire had brought Atlas, properly vested as a therapy dog in training, with documentation that would make it difficult for hospital administration to refuse entry. Dr. Raymond walked ahead, his white coat and confident stride parting the curious onlookers. Outside Charles Sullivan's room, Brandon paced like a caged predator, his perfect composure finally showing cracks. 2 security guards stood nearby, looking uncomfortable with the situation. What part of no visitors was unclear, Doctor? Brandon snapped when he spotted them. And absolutely no dogs. This is ridiculous. Your father is refusing transport, Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Raymond replied calmly. As his physician, I'm obligated to assess his current mental state and respect his wishes if he's demonstrating capacity. My father doesn't know what he wants, Brandon hissed, stepping closer. Yesterday, he thought the nurse was his dead mother. From inside the room came Charles's voice, surprisingly strong. I want to see Claire Reynolds and her dog. I have that right. One of the security guards shifted uncomfortably. Sir, maybe if the lady just talks to him for a few minutes. He'll calm down and go quietly. Brandon's face contorted briefly before settling into a cold mask. 5 minutes. Supervised. He pointed at Claire. The dog stays outside. Atlas goes where I go, Claire replied firmly. Your father specifically asked for both of us. Their standoff was interrupted by the arrival of a woman in a business suit, her hospital ID indicating she was from administration. What seems to be the problem here? Before Brandon could speak, Dr. Raymond stepped forward. I'm Dr. Isaiah Raymond, Mr. Sullivan's neurologist. My patient is refusing medical transport until he speaks with Ms. Reynolds, who saved his life earlier this week. As his physician, I'm supporting his right to this request, as he's demonstrating clear decision-making capacity at this moment. The administrator looked between them, clearly weighing hospital liability against patient rights. 5 minutes, she finally said. With Dr. Raymond present, Brandon's jaw clenched, but he stepped aside. As Claire passed with Atlas, he whispered, This changes nothing. In 1 hour, he'll be on a plane, and you'll never see him again. Charles Sullivan sat upright in his hospital bed, a packed suitcase visible in the corner of the room. His face brightened visibly when Claire and Atlas entered, followed by Dr. Raymond. You came, Charles said, reaching out trembling hands. Thank God. Claire approached the bed, Atlas beside her. The German shepherd immediately placed his head gently on the edge of the mattress, allowing Charles to stroke his fur. Mr. Sullivan, Claire began, acutely aware of the ticking clock. You wanted to see us? Charles's blue eyes, clear and focused, met hers. I remember everything about that day on the lake now. Everything. His voice lowered to a whisper. And I know what my son has been doing. I can't let him take me away. Claire glanced at the partially open door where Brandon stood watching, his expression unreadable. She leaned closer, pretending to adjust Charles's pillow. We found the flash drive, she murmured. We're working on a plan, but we need more time. Charles nodded almost imperceptibly. Then, louder, he said, I want to thank you properly for saving my life. Would you join me for the Waterfront Lantern Festival tonight? It's a local tradition I've never missed. Brandon stepped into the room, his patience clearly exhausted. Dad, there's no time for social planning. The medical transport is waiting. Charles fixed his son with a surprisingly steely gaze. I've attended the Spring Lantern Festival for 47 years, Brandon. It's tonight. I'm not leaving Vermont until tomorrow. That's not possible, Brandon replied, forced calm in his voice. The facility is expecting you today. The jet is fueled and waiting. Then they'll have to wait until tomorrow, Charles insisted, a hint of the formidable businessman he once was emerging through his frail exterior. One more night in Vermont won't change anything. Dr. Raymond stepped forward. Medically speaking, forcing a traumatic relocation against the patient's wishes could cause significant psychological distress. Given Mr. Sullivan's recent near-drowning experience, I would strongly advise against any unnecessary stress. The standoff between father and son was palpable, the air charged with decades of complicated history. Finally, Brandon's shoulders slumped in calculated defeat. Fine. One night. The festival ends at 9. We leave first thing tomorrow morning. He turned to Claire, his voice laced with venom despite his smile. I hope you're free this evening, Ms. Reynolds. My father seems quite determined to have your company. As Brandon stormed out, Charles reached for Claire's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. Thank you, he whispered. Now we have one chance to stop him. The Waterfront Lantern Festival transformed Burlington's Lakeside Park into a magical landscape as dusk settled over Lake Champlain. Paper lanterns hung from trees and floated on the water, their soft glow reflecting off the gentle waves. Despite the festive atmosphere, tension crackled between the 4 people seated at a reserved table near the water's edge. Charles Sullivan sat wrapped in a cashmere blanket despite the mild spring evening, Atlas curled protectively at his feet. Across from him, Brandon maintained his facade of filial concern while shooting venomous glances at Claire and Dr. Raymond whenever his father wasn't looking. Isn't it beautiful? Charles remarked, gesturing toward the illuminated waterfront. When I first started developing properties here in the 70s, this area was all abandoned warehouses and polluted shoreline. Now look at it. Thanks to your vision, Dad, Brandon added smoothly, patting his father's hand. Your legacy is secure, I promise you. Charles's eyes, remarkably clear tonight, met his son's. Is it? Sometimes I wonder what you really understand about legacy, Brandon. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table, broken only when a server appeared with a tray of drinks. Sparkling water for Mr. Sullivan, she announced, as requested by his son. Charles frowned. I'd prefer the local elderberry wine, please. It's tradition. Dad. Brandon interjected with practiced patience. Your medication, one glass won't interact with my evening medication. Charles countered firmly. Dr. Raymond can confirm that. He fixed his gaze on his son. Unless there's some reason you're particularly concerned about my medication tonight. The challenge hung in the air between them. Brandon's smile tightened almost imperceptibly before he relented with a casual wave. Of course, Dad. Whatever you want. As the server left to fetch the wine, Claire caught Dr. Raymond's eye, a silent communication passing between them. Earlier that afternoon, they had put their plan in motion. Anna was currently at the Sullivan estate with a court-approved nurse aide, ostensibly preparing Charles's room for his return tomorrow, but actually searching for the pill samples Charles had hidden. Meanwhile, the university lab was rushing analysis of the pills Anna had collected from the hospital. Ms. Reynolds, Brandon said suddenly, his voice deceptively pleasant. Tell me about your dog training business. It must be fulfilling, if not particularly lucrative. Claire met his condescension with a level gaze. It is fulfilling. After 15 years in corporate marketing, I wanted work that actually mattered. Claire trains service dogs for people with disabilities, Charles added proudly, as if they were old friends. She gave up a six-figure salary to follow her passion. That takes remarkable courage. Brandon's eyebrow arched. Courage? Or irresponsibility? Not everyone can afford to chase dreams on a whim. It wasn't a whim, Claire replied evenly. And I've never regretted it, not even on the hardest days. Charles nodded approvingly. That's what I tried to teach you, Brandon. True success isn't measured by the size of your bank account, but by the impact you have on others' lives. Charming sentiment, Brandon muttered, checking his watch. The lantern ceremony starts in 30 minutes. Perhaps we should move closer to the water. As they relocated to a viewing area along the shore, Brandon pulled Claire aside, his fingers digging into her arm. Whatever game you think you're playing, it ends tonight, he hissed, his charming mask finally slipping. My father leaves for Arizona tomorrow, and if you or that meddling doctor try to interfere again, I'll destroy you both. Claire pulled her arm free. You sound desperate, Brandon. What are you afraid we'll find? His eyes narrowed dangerously. You have no idea who you're dealing with. One phone call, and your little dog training business gets shut down for code violations. Another call, and Dr. Raymond faces a medical board review. Don't test me. Is everything all right? Dr. Raymond approached, concern evident on his face. Perfectly fine, Brandon replied, his mask firmly back in place. Just clarifying expectations. Claire's phone vibrated in her pocket. Stepping away, she checked the screen to find a message from Anna. Found them. Pills hidden in back of medicine cabinet. Bringing to lab now. A surge of hope coursed through her. If the lab confirmed the pills had been tampered with, they would have concrete evidence of Brandon's criminal actions. When she rejoined the group, Charles was seated in a wheelchair at the water's edge, watching children launch miniature lanterns into the lake. My late wife loved this festival, he said wistfully. She said the lanterns were like our hopes and dreams, sent out into the universe. He turned to Claire. Would you help me launch one? For old time's sake. Brandon stepped forward. Dad, let me. No, Charles said firmly. I want Claire to help me. Please, son, give an old man his wish. With poorly concealed irritation, Brandon stepped back, allowing Claire to kneel beside Charles's wheelchair. She accepted a paper lantern from a festival volunteer, holding it steady while Charles carefully lit the small fuel cell inside. The tradition says you should make a wish before launching it, Charles whispered, his weathered hands cupping the delicate paper structure. I wish for justice, he added, so softly that only Claire could hear. Together, they placed the glowing lantern on the water's surface, watching as it joined dozens of others floating like earthbound stars across the dark lake. Claire's phone vibrated again. Another text from Anna. Lab preliminary results positive. Pills from home contain sedatives, not prescribed medication. Dr. Collins calling police now. Claire's heart raced. They had him. Dr. Raymond approached, casually touching Claire's shoulder as he leaned down to admire Charles's lantern. It's beautiful, he said loudly, then whispered. Police are on their way. Keep Brandon here. As if on cue, Brandon's phone rang. His face darkened as he answered, stepping away from the group. Claire watched his expression change from annoyance to alarm as the conversation continued. We need to leave. Now, Brandon announced upon returning, all pretense of calm abandoned. There's an emergency at the estate. What kind of emergency? Charles asked, suspicious. Security alarm, Brandon replied too quickly. Probably nothing, but we should check before heading to the hospital for the night. Dr. Raymond stepped forward. I think it's best if Mr. Sullivan remains here to enjoy the festival. Ms. Reynolds, and I can ensure he gets safely back to the hospital afterward. Brandon's eyes darted between them, calculation and panic warring on his face. That's not necessary. This is family business. I'm staying, Charles declared firmly. I haven't seen the Lantern release finale in years. Brandon's composure cracked. You don't have a choice, Dad. We're leaving now. He moved behind the wheelchair, preparing to push it away. Atlas rose to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he positioned himself between Brandon and the wheelchair. Your dog seems agitated, Ms. Reynolds, Brandon said coldly. Perhaps you should control him before someone gets hurt. Atlas is responding to a threat, Claire replied steadily. He's extremely well trained to recognize when someone might harm his charges. The standoff was interrupted by the appearance of two uniformed police officers approaching their group, accompanied by the hospital administrator from earlier that day. Brandon Sullivan? One officer asked. Brandon straightened, his businessman persona snapping back into place. Yes? Is there a problem, officers? We'd like to ask you some questions regarding your father's medication, the officer continued. We have reason to believe there may have been tampering. The color drained from Brandon's face. For a moment, he seemed to consider his options, including escape. His gaze darted toward the parking area before settling back on the officers. This is absurd, he finally said, forced confidence in his voice. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. We have preliminary lab results indicating otherwise, the second officer stated. Sir, please step away from your father's wheelchair. As Brandon reluctantly complied, Charles reached for Claire's hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. Thank you, he whispered, tears glistening in his eyes, for believing an old man's confused ramblings. They weren't ramblings, Claire assured him, watching as the officers led a protesting Brandon away from the crowded festival. You knew exactly what was happening. Dr. Raymond approached, relief evident on his face. It's not over yet, he cautioned. But Charles is safe tonight. And tomorrow, we'll make sure he stays that way. As the final lanterns were released over Lake Champlain, their golden light reflected in the calm waters, Charles Sullivan watched his son being escorted to a police cruiser. The lanterns guide lost souls home, he murmured sadly. I only wish they could have guided his. Summer heat shimmered over Burlington by the time Brandon Sullivan's preliminary hearing concluded in late June. The judge had denied bail, citing flight risk and the severity of the charges, attempted murder, elder abuse, and financial fraud on a massive scale. The investigation had uncovered offshore accounts, falsified documents, and a trail of manipulations dating back 3 years. Charles Sullivan had moved into a lakeside cottage on Claire's property, a temporary arrangement that seemed increasingly permanent as the weeks passed. His health had stabilized with proper medication and reduced stress, though his neurological condition remained progressive. On good days, his mind was sharp as ever. On bad days, Claire or Anna would gently reorient him. Coffee on the porch? Claire asked, finding Charles at the kitchen table one brilliant June morning, poring over architectural drawings with Atlas lounging at his feet. Please, he nodded, pushing his reading glasses up on his forehead. I've been reviewing these plans for the Foundation headquarters since dawn. Claire poured 2 mugs and joined him on the wraparound porch overlooking her 5 acres of rolling Vermont countryside. In the distance, Lake Champlain sparkled in the morning sun. The Sullivan Reynolds Foundation for Therapeutic Service Animals, Charles mused, savoring the name. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? It's still your money, Charles. It doesn't need my name attached. Nonsense, he replied firmly. Without you and Atlas, I'd be at the bottom of that lake or drugged into oblivion in some Arizona facility. He tapped the blueprints. Besides, who better to run a service dog training center than the best trainer in New England? Claire smiled, still uncomfortable with the scale of what Charles proposed, a state-of-the-art facility where service dogs could be trained and matched with people in need, regardless of their ability to pay. The idea was noble, but the reality of becoming the executive director of a multi-million-dollar foundation terrified her. "I'm a dog trainer, not a CEO," she reminded him, not for the first time. "And I'm a real estate developer who started as a boat builder's son," Charles countered. "We learn. We adapt." His clear blue eyes met hers. "I know what you're afraid of, Claire. You walked away from corporate life because it nearly destroyed your spirit. This is different." Before she could respond, a silver sedan pulled up the gravel driveway. Dr. Raymond emerged, followed by a striking woman in her early 40s with dark auburn hair and Charles's unmistakable blue eyes. "Is that?" Claire began, watching Charles's expression transform with wonder. "Catherine," he whispered, setting down his coffee with a trembling hand. The documents found on Charles's flash drive had revealed more than financial crimes. Hidden in an encrypted folder were adoption papers and records of child support payments to a woman named Sarah Winters, Brandon's mother, along with similar records for another child born to a different woman 2 years before Brandon. A daughter Charles had supported financially but never met. Finding Catherine had taken weeks of careful investigation by the private detective Dr. Raymond recommended. After the initial shock, she had agreed to meet the father she'd never known, flying in from Seattle where she worked as an environmental engineer. Charles stood shakily as Catherine approached the porch, uncertainty and hope warring on both their faces. "Ms. Winters," Dr. Raymond said formally, making the introduction, "this is your father, Charles Sullivan." An awkward silence stretched between them, decades of absence compressed into a single moment. "You have her eyes," Charles finally said, his voice breaking. "Your mother's eyes, but my color." Catherine nodded stiffly, arms crossed defensively. That's what she always said. Her gaze swept over the cottage, the property, and finally settled back on Charles. "This isn't what I expected." "I imagine not," Charles acknowledged. "The great Charles Sullivan, hiding out in a dog trainer's cottage." He gestured to Claire. "This is Claire Reynolds. She and her dog Atlas saved my life in more ways than one." Catherine extended her hand, her demeanor professional despite the emotional circumstances. "Thank you for your part in this situation." Dr. Raymond explained some of it on the drive from the airport. "Would you like some coffee?" Claire offered, sensing the need to give father and daughter space. "Dr. Raymond and I were just about to check on the new puppies in the training barn." Catherine's composure cracked slightly at the mention of puppies. "You train dogs here?" "Service dogs," Claire confirmed. "Atlas is one of our best." At the sound of his name, the German shepherd rose and padded over to Catherine, offering a friendly nudge with his nose. "He's beautiful," Catherine murmured, her hand automatically finding the sweet spot behind his ears. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "I had a shepherd mix growing up. Best friend I ever had." Charles watched the interaction, hope kindling in his eyes. "Perhaps you'd like to see the training facility? It's small now, but we have plans." "We can talk business later, Dad," Dr. Raymond intervened gently, using the paternal term naturally in a way that made Charles blink with emotion. Over the past months, the doctor had become far more than a medical provider. He was the closest thing to family Charles had until now. "Of course," Charles agreed quickly. "Catherine, please, make yourself comfortable. You've come a long way." As Claire and Dr. Raymond tactfully withdrew with Atlas, Catherine took a seat on the porch swing beside her newly discovered father. From the training barn, Claire could see them on the porch, two figures with identical profiles, tentatively navigating the beginning of a relationship both had believed impossible. "Do you think she'll stay?" Claire asked Dr. Raymond as they watched the new litter of potential service puppies tumbling over each other in their enclosure. "Hard to say," he replied. "Finding out your father is a famous developer who never contacted you, then learning your half-brother tried to kill him for his fortune, it's a lot to process. And now Charles wants to reorganize his entire estate, make her a trustee of the foundation." Claire shook her head. "It's overwhelming." Dr. Raymond studied her with his characteristic perception. "For Catherine, or for you?" Claire sighed, leaning against the barn door. "Both, I suppose. 3 months ago, I was running a small dog training business, barely making ends meet but happy. Now I'm living with a billionaire real estate magnate, possibly about to run a massive foundation, and caught in the middle of the most dramatic family reunion imaginable. Having second thoughts? Not exactly, Claire admitted. I care about Charles, and the Foundation's mission is everything I believe in. But sometimes I wonder if I'm in over my head. Dr. Raymond smiled kindly. Welcome to the club. I'm a neurologist who somehow became an amateur detective, expert witness, and family counselor. He glanced back toward the cottage. But I've never regretted getting involved. Have you? Before Claire could answer, the barn door opened, and Catherine entered, followed by Charles, who moved with the tentative gait of someone navigating both physical frailty and emotional uncertainty. Claire, Charles called, his face alight with a joy she hadn't seen before. Catherine wants to see the puppies. She's been developing water filtration systems for communities affected by industrial pollution. The engineering expertise we need for the waterfront property. Catherine looked embarrassed, but didn't contradict him. I'd like to see what you're doing here, she said to Claire. My father speaks very highly of your work. As they toured the modest training facility, Charles explained his vision for the foundation with increasing animation. The puppies, sensing excitement, bounded around their feet, Atlas watching with dignified tolerance. The property I'm donating has a half-mile of lakefront, Charles explained, indicating the direction with a wave. Contaminated by a paper mill in the 60s, but with proper remediation, Dad, Catherine interrupted gently, using the term for the first time. Maybe we could discuss business tomorrow? Today, I'd just like to get to know you. The real you, not the empire builder. Charles stopped mid-sentence, visibly moved. Of course, whatever you want. Actually, Catherine continued, kneeling to pet a particularly bold puppy that had claimed her shoe. I'd like to hear the whole story. From the beginning. How Claire and Atlas saved you. How you realized what Brandon was doing. All of it. Charles looked to Claire, a silent request for help in the telling. Why don't we have lunch on the porch? Claire suggested. It's a long story, and parts of it are still unfolding. As they walked back to the cottage, Catherine fell into step beside Claire, letting Charles and Dr. Raymond move ahead. Thank you, Catherine said quietly, for saving him, for giving me a chance to know my father before. She didn't finish the thought. His condition is progressive, Claire acknowledged, but with proper care and reduced stress, he could have years of good quality life ahead. Catherine nodded, watching Charles gesture animatedly to Dr. Raymond. When your private investigator contacted me, I almost didn't come. I've spent my life believing my father didn't want me. She paused. Now I'm not sure what to believe. Believe what you see, Claire advised. Whatever mistakes Charles made in the past, the man he is now deserves to be known. As they reached the porch, Charles turned to them, his expression suddenly uncertain, vulnerability replacing his earlier enthusiasm. I hope you'll stay a while, he said to Catherine. There's a guest room here, or Dr. Raymond could take you to the family estate if you prefer. It's quite a bit grander than this place. Catherine considered for a moment. Here is fine, she decided. If Claire doesn't mind. Not at all, Claire assured her, realizing she meant it. Despite the complications, despite the uncertain future of the foundation and the ongoing legal battle with Brandon, this unlikely family they were forming felt right somehow. As they settled around the porch table, Atlas positioned himself protectively between Charles and the steps, his vigilance undiminished by the peaceful setting. Begin at the beginning, Catherine requested, her professional reserve softening. I want to understand everything. Charles took a deep breath and started the story on that fateful spring day on Lake Champlain, when a devoted German shepherd saw something wrong and dove into the cold water to right it. The July heat wave broke with a thunderstorm that rattled windows and sent Atlas hiding under Charles's bed. 2 months had passed since Catherine's arrival, and the Sullivan Reynolds Foundation was taking shape with surprising speed. Catherine had extended her visit indefinitely, moving into the renovated boathouse on Claire's property and diving into the environmental remediation plans for the waterfront development. Claire stood at the kitchen window, watching lightning illuminate the churning waters of Lake Champlain. Behind her, Charles and Dr. Raymond pored over legal documents spread across the dining table. Brandon's attorneys are pushing for a plea deal, Dr. Raymond noted, adjusting his reading glasses. 10 years instead of 25, with the possibility of parole after 7. Charles set down his pen with a heavy sigh. What does the prosecutor recommend? She believes we have a strong case for the maximum sentence, especially with the financial crimes now fully documented. The medication tampering alone carries a substantial penalty. Claire turned from the window. What do you want, Charles? The question hung in the air. Charles stared at the documents. Evidence of his son's betrayal laid bare in clinical legal language. I want understanding, he finally said. I want to know why. How the child I raised could become someone capable of. He gestured at the papers, unable to complete the thought. The front door opened, and Catherine entered, shaking rain from her jacket. Despite her professional achievements, she had her father's easy grace and unpretentious manner. The environmental survey team is going to delay until this storm passes, she announced, hanging her dripping coat on the rack. Her eyes found the legal documents. Plea deal discussions? Charles nodded. They want an answer by Friday. Catherine pulled up a chair, her expression troubled. Have you decided? Your father wants to understand Brandon's motivations, Dr. Raymond explained. Catherine's mouth tightened. Does it matter why he did it? He tried to kill you. It matters to me, Charles said softly. Brandon is still my son, just as you are my daughter. Whatever he's done, I need to know what went wrong. Claire brought mugs of hot tea to the table, Atlas finally emerging from his thunderstorm hiding place to press against her leg. What if you spoke with him directly? 3 pairs of eyes turned to her with varying degrees of surprise. Visit Brandon in jail? Dr. Raymond asked, skepticism evident. I'm not sure that's medically advisable given Charles's condition. Not jail, Claire clarified. Here, controlled environment, with security present. Request a supervised visit as part of considering the plea deal. Catherine shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Not physically dangerous, Claire countered. Brandon isn't stupid enough to attempt anything with witnesses and security present. But it might give Charles what he needs, a chance to look his son in the eye and ask why. Charles's expression had shifted from surprise to consideration. It could work. He turned to Dr. Raymond. Isaiah, what do you think? The doctor's hesitation was evident. Over the months, his relationship with Charles had evolved from physician to trusted friend and advisor. Medically speaking, closure could be beneficial. Emotionally, that's harder to predict. I don't like it, Catherine stated flatly. I've only just found you, Dad. I don't want that man anywhere near you. Charles reached across the table, taking his daughter's hand. The gesture, still new between them, carried the weight of their evolving relationship. I understand your concern, but I need this, Catherine. To move forward with the foundation, with our family, I need to face him one last time. The request was approved with surprising speed. Brandon's attorneys, sensing an opportunity to sway Charles toward leniency, arranged for a supervised visit 3 days later. Security measures were extensive. 2 deputies would remain present. Brandon would be handcuffed, and the meeting would take place in Claire's living room, which had been cleared of potential weapons or projectiles. Claire spent the morning of the visit walking Atlas through the woods surrounding her property, trying to calm her own nerves. The German shepherd sensed her anxiety, staying unusually close. Am I doing the right thing? She asked aloud, not expecting an answer. Suggesting this meeting could backfire spectacularly. Atlas looked up at her with his soulful brown eyes, offering silent canine support. When they returned to the house, preparations were already underway. Dr. Raymond had arrived to monitor Charles's vital signs and emotional state. Catherine paced the kitchen, making coffee no one would drink. 2 deputies stood on the porch, radioing updates about the prisoner transport. Are you sure about this? Catherine asked Charles for perhaps the 10th time. Charles sat in his favorite armchair, appearing calmer than anyone else in the house. I'm sure, but I'd like Claire and Atlas present, if that's all right. Claire nodded. Of course. Where do you want us? Beside me, Charles said simply. You've been my strength through all of this. I need you there. A sheriff's department SUV pulled into the driveway exactly at noon. Claire positioned Atlas on his special mat near Charles's chair, giving him the subtle hand signal that meant guard duty. The German shepherd's posture shifted immediately, alert but controlled. Brandon Sullivan entered between 2 deputies, handcuffed and dressed in prison orange that contrasted starkly with his formerly impeccable appearance. 3 months of incarceration had left him thinner, his carefully maintained tan faded to prison pallor. But his eyes remained calculating as they swept the room, lingering briefly on Catherine with visible surprise before settling on Charles. Hello, Dad, he said, his voice hoarse but still carrying that undercurrent of smooth manipulation. "You're looking well." Charles studied his son silently, his expression unreadable. The deputies positioned Brandon on the couch opposite Charles, maintaining their positions on either side. "You have 30 minutes, one deputy stated. No physical contact. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Catherine stood rigidly by the fireplace, arms crossed. Dr. Raymond remained near Charles, subtly monitoring his patient's response. Claire sat on the arm of Charles's chair, one hand resting near Atlas's head. "I assume you've met my daughter," Charles finally said, gesturing toward Catherine. "Your half-sister." Brandon's jaw tightened. So the rumors were true. Dad had a secret family. "Not a family," Charles corrected. "A daughter I should have acknowledged, but didn't. One of many mistakes I've made." Brandon's laugh held no humor. "Is that why I'm here? For family confession time. You're here because I wanted to ask you one question, face to face." Charles leaned forward slightly. "Why, Brandon? Was it just the money?" Something flickered in Brandon's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at the directness of the question. He shifted in his handcuffs, glancing at the deputies before answering. "Would you believe me if I said it started with trying to protect you?" His voice had lost some of its edge. "When your condition was first diagnosed, you were making irrational decisions. Selling properties below market value, talking about giving everything away to charity. So you began managing my affairs," Charles prompted. "Controlling my medication, isolating me from my advisors." Brandon nodded slowly. "It was for your own good, at first. Then," he trailed off, looking down at his handcuffed wrists. "Then you got used to the power," Catherine interjected, unable to remain silent. "And the money." Brandon's gaze hardened when he looked at his newly discovered sister. "You don't know anything about me or our father. You weren't there when he drove our mother away with his workaholic obsession and then buried himself in his empire instead of raising his son. I made mistakes with your mother, with you," Charles acknowledged quietly. "But nothing justifies what you did, Brandon." "No." Brandon leaned forward, handcuffs jangling. "You left me with nannies while you built your precious buildings. You missed every school play, every baseball game. When I finally joined the company, nothing I did was ever good enough for the great Charles Sullivan." "That's not true," Charles objected. "I gave you everything. Everything except your approval." Brandon's composure cracked completely. "I spent my entire life trying to live up to the Sullivan legacy, and you were already planning to give it all away. To strangers." Atlas growled softly at Brandon's raised voice, but Claire quieted him with a gentle touch. "The foundation was meant to be our legacy, Brandon," Charles said softly. "Yours and mine. I wanted us to build something meaningful together." Brandon's laugh was bitter. "By giving away what 3 generations of Sullivans built? No thanks." Charles studied his son, sadness etching deeper lines in his weathered face. "When did it change from protection to attempted murder? When did you decide I needed to die?" The blunt question silenced everyone in the room. Brandon's eyes darted around as if seeking escape, but there was nowhere to go. "I never wanted you dead," he finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. "The lake, that was an accident. You fell." "Brandon," Charles said with surprising gentleness, "we both know that's not true." For a moment, something vulnerable crossed Brandon's face. A glimpse of the child he had once been, desperate for his father's approval. Then the mask slammed back into place. "Believe what you want," he said coldly. "It doesn't matter now. You found your replacement heir anyway." He nodded toward Catherine. "I hope she's everything you wanted in a child." Catherine stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. "I'm not a replacement. I'm just another person he hurt by his absence. The difference is, I'm willing to forgive and move forward." Brandon's bitter smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good luck with that. The great Charles Sullivan is excellent at grand gestures, but terrible at actually being there when it matters." Charles sagged slightly in his chair, the weight of his son's accusation hitting home. Dr. Raymond moved closer, concerned, but Charles waved him off. "You're right," Charles admitted, surprising everyone including Brandon. "I failed you as a father. I was so focused on building something that would last, I missed what was most important." He leaned forward, holding his son's gaze. "I'm sorry, Brandon. Truly sorry." The simple apology seemed to affect Brandon more than anything else that had been said. For a brief moment, his carefully constructed defenses wavered. "It's too late for that," he finally responded, but his voice had lost its edge. Perhaps, Charles acknowledged. But I needed to say it, and you needed to hear it. He straightened in his chair. I've instructed my attorneys to accept the plea deal. 10 years, with the possibility of parole after 7. Brandon's surprise was evident. Why? Because destroying what remains of your life won't heal mine. Charles's voice was steady despite the emotion behind his words. The foundation will move forward. Catherine, Claire, and I will build something positive from this tragedy. And when you're released, there will be a place for you too, if you want it. Brandon stared at his father, disbelief warring with something that might have been hope, quickly suppressed. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, Charles replied. The choice will be yours. Redemption is always possible, Brandon. I have to believe that. The deputies stepped forward, indicating the time was nearly up. Brandon rose, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. I don't understand you, he said finally. After everything, you're still willing to offer me a second chance. Charles nodded simply. You're my son. As the deputies prepared to escort Brandon out, he paused, looking back at the unlikely family gathered in Claire's living room. His father, the half-sister he'd never known, the dog trainer who had unraveled his plans, and the loyal German shepherd who had saved Charles's life. I'll think about it, he said, the closest thing to vulnerability he'd shown. Then the mask slipped back into place. But don't hold your breath. After Brandon was gone, silence settled over the room. Charles exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a burden had been set down. Do you really believe he can change? Catherine asked skeptically. Charles smiled faintly. I have to try. After all, look at us, a father and daughter finding each other after decades, building something new together. If that's possible, anything is. Claire exchanged glances with Dr. Raymond, both recognizing the physical toll the emotional encounter had taken on Charles. But they also saw something new in his eyes, a peace that hadn't been there before. Come on, Atlas, Claire said, rising. I think we all could use some fresh air. As they stepped onto the porch, the summer afternoon stretched before them. The storm of the previous night leaving the world washed clean, ready for whatever might come next. Autumn painted Vermont's landscape in brilliant hues of amber, crimson, and gold by the time construction began on the Sullivan Reynolds Foundation headquarters. The waterfront property, once an abandoned paper mill, was being transformed into a state-of-the-art facility for training service dogs and matching them with people in need. Claire stood at the edge of the construction site, watching as Catherine directed an environmental remediation team near the shoreline. In the 4 months since their first meeting, Charles's daughter had become not just a colleague but a friend, her initial reserve melting into dry humor and fierce loyalty that reminded Claire of Atlas. Impressive, isn't it? Dr. Raymond joined her, handing over a cup of coffee from the food truck that had become a regular fixture for the construction crew. Terrifying, Claire admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. I still wake up some mornings convinced this is all an elaborate dream. Dr. Raymond chuckled. The Claire Reynolds I met 6 months ago would never have imagined herself as the executive director of a multi-million-dollar foundation. The Isaiah Raymond I met wouldn't have imagined himself as the chief medical advisor for said foundation, she countered with a smile. Or practically family to the Sullivans. Their comfortable banter was interrupted by the arrival of Charles's wheelchair, pushed by his new assistant, Michael, a recent graduate from the University of Vermont's Healthcare Administration program. At 78, Charles had good days and bad, but his determination remained unwavering. There you two are, he called, his voice strong despite his frail appearance. The architect has finalized the training arena designs. I wanted your opinion, Claire. Claire knelt beside his wheelchair, examining the blueprints he unrolled with careful hands. The proposed training space was even more impressive than she had envisioned. Adaptive equipment, sensory rooms for autism service dogs, specialized areas for mobility assistance training. It's perfect, she said, emotion tightening her throat. More than I ever dreamed possible. Charles beamed, the smile transforming his weathered face. Nothing but the best for our dogs and the people they'll help. Catherine joined them, brushing dirt from her hands. The remediation team says we're ahead of schedule. Soil tests are coming back cleaner than expected. Excellent, Charles nodded. And the accessibility consultants? Coming tomorrow, Claire confirmed. They'll review all the designs to ensure we're exceeding ADA requirements. Their planning session was interrupted by Atlas's alert bark. The German Shepherd, now the unofficial mascot of the foundation, raced across the construction site toward the entrance where a familiar car had pulled up. "Anna," Claire called, waving as the nurse emerged from her vehicle. Anna Calderon approached, her silver-streaked hair now styled in a practical bob, her hospital scrubs replaced by casual clothes. After testifying at Brandon's hearing, she had taken a leave of absence from the hospital, eventually accepting Charles's offer to join the foundation as its healthcare coordinator. "Sorry I'm late," she called. "The meeting with the Veterans Rehabilitation Center ran long. They're extremely interested in our PTSD service dog program." The group made their way to the temporary office trailer at the edge of the property, where preliminary foundation business was conducted while construction continued. Inside, photographs and plans covered the walls. Claire's vision expanded and refined through Charles's resources and Catherine's practical engineering mind. "The board meeting is at 2, Michael reminded them, efficiently organizing papers on the conference table. "The main agenda item is the scholarship program for low-income recipients." Charles positioned his wheelchair at the head of the table. "Before we get started, there's something I'd like to discuss." He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I received this yesterday." Claire recognized the prison postal markings immediately. "From Brandon?" Charles nodded, carefully opening the letter with slightly trembling hands. "His first communication since our meeting 3 months ago." He cleared his throat, putting on his reading glasses. He writes, "Dad, the anger management program here is prison-mandated garbage, but the therapist said writing to you might help, so here goes. I'm not ready for forgiveness or grand reconciliations. I'm still angry about a lot of things. But I've been thinking about what you said about redemption always being possible. I've started teaching a business class to other inmates. Nothing fancy, just basic financial literacy. It's not terrible. Makes the time pass. I heard about the foundation from my attorney. Sounds like Catherine is proving herself useful. No surprise there. She is a Sullivan, after all. Don't wait for me to come around. Build your legacy with your new family. I need to figure out who I am without the Sullivan name opening doors. Brandon P.S. Tell the dog lady her shepherd is the only reason I'm writing this. If that animal could recognize something worth saving in you, maybe there's hope for me too." Silence settled over the room as Charles refolded the letter. His expression was complicated, hope tempered by realism, sadness by cautious optimism. "It's a start," Dr. Raymond observed quietly. Catherine's response was more measured. "He's still manipulative. Notice how he turns his teaching into a virtue while taking a jab at me in the same paragraph." "True," Charles acknowledged. "Brandon won't change overnight. Maybe not completely ever. But he's reaching out, in his way." Claire studied Charles's face, concerned about the emotional toll. "Are you okay?" He smiled faintly. "Yes. Better than I expected, actually. There's something freeing about accepting people as they are, not as you wish they were." He tucked the letter back into his pocket. "Now let's discuss this scholarship program. I've been thinking about how to structure it." The meeting proceeded smoothly, the small but dedicated team working through the logistics of launching the foundation's first major initiative. By late afternoon, Claire found herself alone in the trailer, finalizing grant proposals while Atlas dozed under her desk. A knock at the door roused Atlas to alertness. Catherine entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. "Thought you could use this," she said, setting 1 cup on Claire's desk. "You've been at it for hours." Claire stretched, accepting the tea gratefully. "Thanks. Just trying to finish these before tomorrow." Catherine settled into a chair, studying Claire with the same perceptive gaze Charles sometimes used. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure," Claire replied, curious. "Are you happy with all of this?" Catherine gestured to encompass the foundation, the construction site, the entire unexpected turn their lives had taken. Claire considered the question carefully. Happy seems too simple a word. Overwhelmed sometimes. Challenged often. Purposeful always. She met Catherine's gaze. "Why do you ask?" Catherine's expression softened. "Because you never asked for any of this. One morning you went hiking with your dog, and suddenly you're responsible for a multi-million-dollar foundation and, let's be honest, for my father's well-being in many ways." "I don't regret it," Claire said firmly. "Not for a moment. I know. That's what makes you extraordinary." Catherine sipped her tea. "Dad thinks so too, you know." He told me recently that meeting you and Atlas was the best thing that ever happened to him, even counting finding me. Claire felt heat rise to her cheeks. He's exaggerating. He's not. And neither am I when I say thank you. Catherine's usual professional demeanor gave way to genuine emotion. For saving him, for helping find me, for creating all of this. She gestured to the plans surrounding them. For giving him purpose in whatever time he has left. The moment was interrupted by Atlas suddenly standing at attention, tail wagging. Seconds later, Dr. Raymond appeared in the doorway. "There you are," he said, slightly out of breath. "Charles is having one of his good days and wants to visit the Lantern Festival Planning Committee. Apparently, he's decided the foundation should be the primary sponsor this year." Claire checked her watch. "The meeting's in 20 minutes downtown. We'll never make it." "Already handled," Dr. Raymond replied with a smile. "I've pushed it back to 5. Charles is waiting in the car with Michael." Catherine gathered her jacket. "I'll drive. You coming, Claire?" Claire looked at the grant proposals, then at Atlas's expectant face. Work could wait. Absolutely. The drive into Burlington took them along the shoreline, where the late afternoon sun cast golden light across Lake Champlain. Charles sat in the passenger seat, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of how the waterfront had evolved over decades. "This stretch used to be all industrial," he explained to Catherine. "The transformation didn't happen overnight. It took vision, persistence, and community buy-in. Much like the foundation," Dr. Raymond observed from the back seat. Charles nodded. "Exactly. Change that matters rarely happens quickly." As they passed the spot where Atlas had rescued Charles that fateful spring day, Claire felt a strange sense of completion. The lake that had nearly claimed Charles's life now served as the backdrop for his renewed purpose. "The Lantern Festival is in 3 weeks," Charles continued, enthusiasm animating his voice. "This year, I thought we might launch a special lantern in honor of the foundation's official opening." "That sounds perfect," Claire agreed, catching his eye in the rearview mirror. "The lanterns guide lost souls home." Charles smiled, understanding her reference to the local legend. "Indeed they do, Claire. Indeed they do." At the planning committee meeting, Charles was greeted with warmth and respect. The foundation's sponsorship was accepted with gratitude, and plans were made for a special ceremony to recognize its contribution to the community. As they left City Hall, the first few autumn leaves swirled around them in the evening breeze. Charles, leaning on his cane rather than using the wheelchair for this outing, paused to watch them dance across the brick sidewalk. "I used to be too busy to notice seasons changing," he remarked softly. "Always focused on the next project, the next acquisition." "What a waste." Dr. Raymond placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "Not a waste, Charles. A journey that led you here." "True enough," Charles agreed. "And speaking of journeys, I think we should celebrate. Dinner at Lakeview Bistro? My treat." The impromptu dinner stretched into a warm, laughter-filled evening. Charles was at his most charming, regaling them with stories from his early career. Catherine shared anecdotes from her environmental work in Seattle. Dr. Raymond spoke of his late wife with a tenderness that showed his grief had softened into fond remembrance. As dessert arrived, Charles raised his glass of sparkling cider. "To found family," he toasted. "The ones who choose us, and whom we choose in return." The sentiment resonated deeply as they clinked glasses. Looking around the table, Claire marveled at how thoroughly her life had transformed in just 6 months. From a solitary dog trainer struggling to make ends meet, she had become part of something larger, a mission, a purpose, and this unlikely family bound together by circumstance but sustained by genuine affection. Later, driving Charles home to the lake cottage he still preferred over the family estate, Claire noticed him gazing thoughtfully at the starlit water. "Penny for your thoughts," she prompted gently. "I was just thinking about legacies," he replied. "What we leave behind. For most of my life, I thought it was about buildings, developments, changing skylines." He turned to her, his eyes clear and present in a way that signaled one of his good days. "Now I know it's about changed lives. The ripple effect of compassion." Claire helped him from the car, Atlas padding ahead to the cottage door. "The foundation will be your greatest legacy, Charles." He shook his head, smiling. "No, Claire. My greatest legacy is the family we've created. You, Catherine, Isaiah, even Brandon in his way. The foundation is just the vehicle for the real work." As autumn deepened around them, Preparations for both the Lantern Festival and the Foundation's official opening intensified. Claire found herself divided between administrative duties, dog training, and ensuring Charles had the support he needed as his condition fluctuated. Through it all, Atlas remained her constant companion, his steady presence a reminder of how one instinctive act of canine courage had set in motion a transformation none of them could have imagined when spring first touched the waters of Lake Champlain. The Winter Lantern Festival arrived on a perfect December evening, snow lightly dusting Burlington's waterfront like powdered sugar. Despite temperatures hovering just below freezing, crowds gathered along the shore, their breath-forming clouds in the crisp air as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Claire adjusted Charles's scarf as they sat in a heated tent reserved for festival sponsors and VIPs. At 78, the cold affected him more severely, but wild horses couldn't have kept him from attending tonight's event. "Is everything ready?" he asked, his eyes bright with anticipation despite the increased tremor in his hands, a sign his medication was wearing off. "Everything's perfect," Claire assured him. "Catherine's overseeing the special lantern launch, and Dr. Raymond is bringing Anna from the parking lot now." Charles nodded, satisfied. He was having one of his better days cognitively, though physically the decline was becoming more evident. The dual progression of his condition, mental clarity coming and going while his physical abilities steadily diminished, had become their shared reality over the past months. Atlas lay at Charles's feet, his custom-made service dog vest emblazoned with the Sullivan Reynolds Foundation logo, a silhouette of a German shepherd and a human hand reaching toward each other. Though officially retired from training to become Charles's full-time companion, Atlas remained alert to his needs, responding to subtle changes in his condition sometimes before Claire noticed them herself. "There you are." Catherine's voice preceded her entrance into the tent, snowflakes melting in her dark hair. In the 7 months since meeting her father, she had fully embraced her role in both the Foundation and Charles's life, dividing her time between Seattle and Vermont with increasing portions spent on the East Coast. The mayor just arrived. He wants a photo with the Foundation team before the ceremony. Charles straightened in his wheelchair, smoothing his lapels with dignity. "Is my tie straight?" "Perfect," Claire assured him, catching Catherine's eye with a silent communication that had developed between them, a shared commitment to preserving Charles's dignity even as his health declined. Dr. Raymond arrived with Anna, stamping snow from their boots. "Quite a turnout," he observed. "The local paper is here, and I spotted a crew from the Boston affiliate news station. Brandon might see it then," Charles said quietly. Though his son remained in prison, Charles insisted on keeping him informed of the Foundation's progress through regular letters, most of which received terse but gradually lengthening replies. The mayor entered the tent, bringing a flurry of activity with him. Photos were taken, hands shaken, and congratulations offered on the Foundation's official opening earlier that week. The waterfront facility had been completed ahead of schedule, thanks to Catherine's efficient management and Charles's seemingly limitless resources. Already, 6 service dogs were in training, with the first placements scheduled for spring. As the official party made their way to the stage erected near the water's edge, Claire pushed Charles's wheelchair carefully over the specially constructed ramp. Atlas walked beside them, his presence drawing excited whispers from children in the crowd who recognized the hero dog from local news stories. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor began, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. "Welcome to Burlington's 35th Annual Winter Lantern Festival. Tonight is particularly special as we celebrate not only our community tradition, but also welcome the Sullivan Reynolds Foundation as our primary sponsor." Applause rippled through the crowd. Claire stood behind Charles's wheelchair, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Catherine and Dr. Raymond flanked them, with Anna and several Foundation board members completing their group. "For those unfamiliar with our tradition," the mayor continued, "the Lantern Festival dates back to the early fishing communities of Lake Champlain. Lanterns were set adrift to guide lost souls home and to light the way for those at sea. Today, we continue this tradition as a symbol of hope, remembrance, and community." As the mayor spoke, festival volunteers moved through the crowd, distributing small paper lanterns with LED lights inside, a modern, fire-safe adaptation of the traditional oil lanterns. Before we begin the community launch, I'd like to invite Charles Sullivan to say a few words and launch our honorary lantern. A murmur went through the crowd as Charles rose shakily from his wheelchair, waving off Claire's concerned hand. Leaning heavily on his cane, he made his way to the microphone with deliberate steps, Atlas vigilant at his side. "Thank you, Mayor Richards," Charles began, his voice wavering slightly before finding its strength. "Some of you have known me for decades as a developer who changed Burlington's skyline. Others know me only from recent headlines about my family's difficulties." A sympathetic chuckle rippled through the crowd. The attempted murder case and subsequent financial fraud discoveries had made national news impossible to ignore even in the close-knit community. "But tonight, I stand before you as simply a grateful man." Charles paused, gathering his thoughts. "Last spring, I nearly lost my life in Lake Champlain. Instead, I found a new one, thanks to a remarkable dog and the woman who trained him." He gestured toward Claire, who blushed as scattered applause broke out. The Sullivan Reynolds Foundation was born from that moment of crisis. Its mission is to train service dogs for those in need, regardless of their ability to pay. Because we all need help sometimes. Help getting back up, help finding our way home. Charles's voice grew stronger, passion overcoming frailty. Just as the lanterns once guided fishermen home through darkness and storm, these dogs will guide people through their own darkest times. Catherine stepped forward with the special ceremonial lantern, larger than the others, crafted of delicate rice paper in the foundation's colors, with their logo illuminated from within. "This lantern," Charles continued, "represents not just our foundation's official launch, but a belief that even the most difficult circumstances can lead to unexpected blessings. That rescue can come from the most surprising sources. That second chances are always possible." His gaze swept over the crowd, lingering briefly on Claire, Catherine, Dr. Raymond, and Anna, the unlikely family that had formed around him in the wake of tragedy. "As we set this lantern adrift, I invite each of you to consider what needs guiding home in your own lives. What light you might offer to others who are lost." With Catherine's assistance, Charles carefully placed the ceremonial lantern on the water. A gentle push sent it gliding out onto the dark surface of Lake Champlain, its light reflected in rippling patterns across the water. One by one, community members followed suit, setting their smaller lanterns adrift until the lake became a constellation of moving lights, a mirror to the stars above. Claire stood at the water's edge with Atlas, watching the beautiful scene unfold. Charles joined them, lowering himself carefully onto a bench overlooking the lake. "It's more beautiful than I imagined," he said softly. "It is," Claire agreed, sitting beside him. Atlas settled at their feet, ever watchful. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the lanterns drift farther into the lake. Finally, Charles spoke again, his voice reflective. "I've been thinking about that day on the lake. How different everything would be if you and Atlas hadn't been hiking that particular trail at that exact moment." Claire nodded. "I think about that too." "Do you believe in fate, Claire?" Charles asked, turning to face her. "That some things are meant to be, no matter how unlikely?" "I don't know about fate," she replied thoughtfully, "but I do believe in connections. How one small action can create ripples that change everything." She glanced down at Atlas. He acted on instinct that day, pure, unselfish instinct to help someone in trouble. "The best part of ourselves?" Charles murmured. "The part that acts without calculation or expectation of reward." He gestured toward the foundation building, visible down the shoreline, its windows warmly lit against the winter night. "That's what I hope we've built, a place where that kind of compassion can flourish." Catherine approached, carrying cups of hot chocolate for each of them. Dr. Raymond and Anna followed, completing their circle. "The mayor says it's the most successful festival turnout in years," Catherine reported, handing Charles his cup with the careful attention she always showed to his increasingly limited dexterity. "People are asking about volunteer opportunities at the foundation," Anna added. "I've already collected a list of 20 names." Charles smiled, satisfaction evident in his expression. "Good. The more community involvement, the better." A local photographer approached, requesting a group photo for the newspaper. They gathered together, the lantern-lit lake providing a magical backdrop. Charles insisted on standing for the picture, supported by Dr. Raymond on one side and Catherine on the other, with Claire and Anna flanking them and Atlas centered in front. "The Sullivan Reynolds family," the photographer said, positioning his camera. No one corrected him. The designation, unplanned but fitting, settled over them comfortably. They had become a family, forged not by blood but by choice and circumstance, the most powerful bonds of all. After the photo, as the festival began to wind down, Charles turned to Claire. "There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." His tone was serious enough to catch her full attention. "What is it?" she asked, concerned by the sudden gravity in his expression. "My legal team has finalized my updated estate plans." He held up a hand to forestall her objection. I know, you don't want to discuss this, but it's important." Claire sighed, recognizing his determined expression. "All right, I've established trusts for both Catherine and Brandon, though Brandon's is contingent on certain conditions upon his release." Charles spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing whether rather than his own mortality. "The bulk of my estate will go to the foundation, ensuring its operation in perpetuity." "Charles," Claire began, but he continued determinedly. "The lake cottage and surrounding property, however, I'm leaving to you and Atlas." His blue eyes, clouded by age but still piercing, held hers steadily. "It's your home now as much as mine. I want you to have it, without conditions or complications." Claire felt tears threatening. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept, and that you'll keep an eye on my children, both of them." Charles replied, a hint of his dry humor returning. "Catherine is brilliant, but works too hard. Brandon, well, Brandon will need guidance when he's released, whether he admits it or not." "Of course I will," Claire promised, emotion tightening her throat. "But you're going to be around to do that yourself for a long time yet." Charles patted her hand, neither confirming nor denying her optimistic assertion. They both knew his condition was progressing steadily, each good day becoming more precious. Their conversation was interrupted by Atlas suddenly standing at attention, his focus on a figure approaching from the festival entrance. A slender woman in her early 30s with a service dog vest draped over her arm made her way tentatively toward them. "Excuse me," she said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm Melissa Warren. I read about your foundation in the paper, and I—" She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "I was wondering about applying for a service dog. I have severe PTSD from military service, and my therapist suggested." Charles's face lit up with purpose. "Ms. Warren, you've come to the perfect place. Please, join us." He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Claire, would you explain our application process?" As Claire outlined the foundation's program, she watched Charles engaging with their potential first client, his entire demeanor energized by the interaction. This was his element now, not boardrooms or development sites, but connecting people with resources that could change their lives. Later, as they prepared to leave the festival, Charles gazed out over the lake one last time. The lanterns were distant now, small points of light against the vast darkness. "It's been quite a journey," he mused. "From that day on the lake to this moment. And it's not over yet," Claire reminded him gently. "No," Charles agreed with a smile. "The best parts may still be ahead." As if confirming his optimism, his phone chimed with an incoming message. Catherine helped him retrieve it from his pocket, her expression changing to surprise as she read the screen. "It's from Brandon," she said, handing Charles the phone. He saw the festival coverage online. Charles read the message silently, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face before settling into cautious hope. He passed the phone to Claire. The message was brief but significant. "The lanterns looked good on TV. Maybe I'll see them in person next year. Foundation building looks solid, good design choices. Tell Atlas I said thanks." It's a start," Charles said quietly. As they made their way back to the cars, snow began falling more heavily, large flakes drifting lazily through the night air. Atlas pranced ahead, catching snowflakes on his nose, his joy infectious. Claire pushed Charles's wheelchair, Catherine walked arm in arm with Dr. Raymond, and Anna followed with Melissa, already discussing her service dog application. Together, they moved forward into the winter night, a family created by chance, cemented by choice, and guided by the simple, powerful instinct that had led a German shepherd to dive into cold water to save a drowning man. "You know," Charles said softly as they reached the cars, "I've built skyscrapers and developed entire waterfronts, but nothing compares to this. What we've created together." Claire squeezed his shoulder gently. "The beginning of a legacy that will outlast all of us." "Yes," Charles agreed. watching Atlas joyfully circling through the falling snow. A reminder that sometimes salvation comes with 4 paws and an unfailing heart. As they drove away from the waterfront, the lanterns continued their journey across Lake Champlain, points of light guiding the way home through darkness. Just as a German shepherd's instinctive courage had illuminated a path forward when all had seemed lost. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and if you watched until the end, comment, "I watched until the end," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears in the end screen. It's going to be very exciting.